Brigham Young is a very well-known American figure. In fact, he is called the American Moses. But there are other lesser-known things that show his leadership and left a great legacy. He also directed the settling of around 400 communities in the West. How was he successful in leading these people to settle so many places? Brigham Young was born and raised in Whittingham, Vermont, and was the ninth of 11 children. His parents were John Young, a Revolutionary War veteran, and Abigail Howe, who died when Brigham was 14. He only had 11 days of school and was still able to become an amazing carpenter, joiner, painter, and glazier. He received a Book of Mormon and was shortly thereafter baptized. He then went to meet Joseph Smith and was ordained to be one of the church's 12 apostles. When Joseph Smith died, he became the next president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. He did some amazing things during his lifetime. He supervised a huge trek with thousands of pioneers to go to the Salt Lake Valley. He was the first territorial governor of Utah for 2 terms and the superintendent of Indian Affairs in the Utah Territory. He was also the Mormon Church's president for 30 years, and his statue can be found in Washington, D.C. today. He also left a great legacy of settlements and colonizing. He left over 300 settlements in Canada, the western United States, and Mexico. Many of these towns and cities are thriving today. Speaking of Brigham Young colonizing many places, Elder Stephen E. Snow, the church historian and recorder for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, said,
"They went as far south as Mexico and as far north as into Idaho, and even into Canada during the 19th century to find places to found communities, small communities, most of which still exist."
A historian named Leonard J. Arrington wrote, quote, "Brigham Young was a kingdom builder with dreams as grandiose as Sam Houston or John C. Fremont. But, unlike them, he was successful. Brigham Young was the supreme American paradox, the business genius of a Rockefeller with the spiritual sensitivities of an Emerson. He was not merely an entrepreneur with a shared vision of America as the promised land, he was a prophet, and he built beyond himself." Brigham Young had to figure out how to move many people different places. Their hardships helped to bond these people, and they learned to work together. They not only learned to trust Brigham Young, but they learned to trust in God.
The common cause of all of the people that they were going to have create a new community, a new place where they could worship.
The people had enough faith in Brigham Young to go wherever he asked them to go.
In fact, actually, mission calls were often given for individuals to go to far-off corners of the territory to settle a little community that was quite hard, but because they felt their call had come from a prophet to do this, they had more incentive to do it than maybe the average person might have.
One thing that made him a good leader is that he developed other good leaders. Steve Young, the great-great-grandson of Brigham Young, said,
"Well, I think Brigham Young knew that if all of the saints just came to Salt Lake, then they would, the stronger ones would kind of run the society and the church, and it wouldn't allow everybody to grow and progress. He decided if we send these saints out around the West, then they will have their own congregations of the church. They'll have to support themselves and their own families, and they'll have to help the poor and the needy in their communities, and that way everybody will grow and progress more than if everybody's around one central location."
These settlements were designed using the Zion method of settlement. I was able to interview Mr. Westover, a historian from the museum This Is the Place, which is in Utah. On this subject, he said,
"The physical aspects for the Zion method of settlement was what you would call the city of Zion layout. In other words, you'd have one single feature that was the center of the city or the center of the community, and that would usually be a church or a temple, and everything else would radiate out from that, with that temple or that church being right in the center of the community. And all the streets were to be running straight, north and south and east and west, at 90 degrees to each other and be evenly spaced and evenly blocked. So it was like a really organized grid system, as opposed to many towns and cities where the streets kind of turn and bend and curve and go any which way. This is very, precise and mathematical in the way it was laid out. And there were also lots of rules to it, too, like only so many houses per city block, and the houses should be facing different directions, so that if you looked out your front door, you wouldn't be able to look in the front door and watch inside your neighbor's house. There was some, form of privacy there. And then there was to be running water running down both sides of the street, and the streets had to be wide enough for a wagon to turn around without having to stop and back up. And these were all very, very unusual for towns and cities back in that time period to be laid out this way. This is very unique. And to this day, you can still go sometimes and determine which towns and cities started as Mormon colonies, because they'll have a section of town in the old part of town where the streets are laid out this way, and it makes it identifiable. One of those, for example, is Las Vegas.
These aspects of the Zion method of settlement were able to make the perfect city. It was very well organized and planned out. It was broken down so much so that you would even have privacy. Snowflake, Arizona is a great example of a place that Brigham Young colonized. Mr. William Flake was the first to purchase his ranch, and then other Mormon settlers began to move there. Some wanted to name this place after William Flake, and others wanted it to be named after Erastus Snow, the Mormon apostle in charge of Arizona colonization. They both met while on the road and made the name Snowflake. One settler that went to Snowflake was Måns Larsson, born in Sweden, was an expert carpenter, and the carpenter for the king. He and his wife desired to gather with the saints in Zion by traveling across the seas and across land to Salt Lake City, Utah. In preparing for the long journey, Måns made many handcarts that the pioneers traveled with. It was a very difficult trek. After they arrived in Utah, they were called by Brigham Young to help settle Arizona. Because Måns was a carpenter, his skills would contribute to the new community. His wife and daughters contributed with skills including spinning wool into yarn. It is written that Måns helped build the first church building in Snowflake, Arizona, as well as the first family bench with a back. The original church was incorporated into the church that now stands. He also built the first coffin for the community. These were skills he brought. Another example of a skill a person was asked to bring was milling wheat and other grains. Charles Shumway was asked to settle in Arizona as well. He had built 7 grist mills in Utah and built a final grist mill in the town of Shumway, just a few miles from Snowflake.
But here in this area, he built a grist mill. Before that, they had to go to either Phoenix or Albuquerque to have their wheat ground. So he serviced the entire northeastern part of Arizona.
Other skills were brickmaking and laying, as you can see with some of the beautiful pioneer homes built in Snowflake during that time period. Although there are so many good things about Brigham Young, he was also thought badly of. Some people think that he was a fake prophet and a man that was responsible for many pioneers' deaths. In fact, many people in newspapers ridiculed him and the LDS people. I was able to interview Professor Mark Miller from Southern Utah University in the Department of History, Sociology, and Anthropology. He said that at first the Mormons wanted to be friendly to the Indians, and Brigham Young is even quoted as saying, "It is better to feed them than fight them." Near the area of Fillmore, Utah, Chief Kanosh and some of his tribe even joined the faith. For the most part, it went on peacefully, but the European population kept growing. Indians were being pushed out more and more. The settlers came with the European concept land of ownership, and over time this had the effect of removing Native Americans from their tribal lands and causing hardship and difficulty in even surviving. Contrary to what these people may think, I believe that he was a great man, and as for the people that died, it wasn't Brigham Young's fault. They believed in him and went by their own free will.